Hey there, community bankers. Welcome back to the Correspondent podcast from Independent Correspondent Bankers Bank. I'm your host, Madison Kaplinger, Marketing Specialist for ICBB. Our Bank Operations Opportunities meeting, or BOOM, is coming up in September, and we can't wait for you to hear from our lineup of expert speakers. One of those speakers is Coy Ogle from Finovifi, a fintech built to help community banks detect and fight check fraud. His presentation, Check Fraud, Will It Continue to Increase, is one that you don't want to miss, as Coy and his team are extremely knowledgeable about the check marketplace and the fraud taking place within it. Please welcome Coy to the podcast. Hey there, community bankers. I am here with Coy Ogle from Finovifi. How are you doing today, Coy?
Doing great. Thank you for asking. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Am I saying the name of your company right, Finovifi?
Yes, you are. It's pronounced different ways by other people, but that is correct.
Awesome. Okay. So for those who maybe aren't familiar with you or with Finovifi, tell us a little bit about yourself and your professional background.
Uh, sure. My name's Coy Ogle, and I, started my working career back in 1988 with NCR Corporation, based out of Louisville/Lexington, Kentucky, calling on the community banks here in Central, Eastern, and Western Kentucky. Did that for several years, went into document solutions, check imaging, one of the industry market's first check imaging providers to the market. I have spent the last 37 years in the fintech/community bank space. The last 23 and a half years spent with a company by the name of FIS Corporation before joining Finovifi in April of 2024. Spent my entire career helping community banks with item processing, core. Now the last part of it, fighting fraud, check fraud, and trying to. Finovifi, the company that I'm with for the past year and a half, is based out of Birmingham, Alabama. We are an AI-driven technology company to combat fraud, compliance, and optimizing core processing. We tailor our solutions to the community bank marketplace to help them compete, be more efficient, and streamline their operations. The executive team here at Finovifi has been in the business for nearly 35 to 40 years, a wealth of experience helping and serving community banks. We tailor all of our solutions to help them compete and win.
Awesome. That sounds a lot like, what the Bankers Bank strives to do. So really glad to have you on, and really glad to have you speaking at our Boom event coming up in September. And you're giving a presentation called Check Fraud, Will It Continue to Increase? And I won't ask you to answer that question here. I'll save that for your presentation. But to start, tell us a little bit about what trends you've seen with check payments in community banks in general.
Check payments in community banks, as most of you folks know, the number of checks are going down that are being written by the folks out there as more technologies such as PayPal, Venmo, other automated solutions are helping transfer money from B2B or P2P. But the number of checks going down doesn't indicate that fraud is going down with it. However, it's just the opposite. Fraud is up 600% since 2014. The bad guys are getting good at being bad, and we need, as fintech providers, help our community banks compete and help protect themselves by bringing technology to the market that can match them step for step, and that's what we do.
Yeah, I'm not surprised to hear that check usage is trending downward. I mean, myself, I can't remember the last time I've written a check personally. It's not very often at all, as, these other payment technologies come into the marketplace, which makes me wonder, you mentioned the bad guys are getting smarter, which, I mean, we're seeing with all types of fraud across the board, I think. But, what are some of the tactics you're seeing check fraudsters employ?
Well, back to your comment a second ago, with bill pay and digital banking and all the other platforms that you can now make payments to folks such as, utilities, phone companies, folks that you normally would write checks to in the past, now you can do electronically. That's reduced the number of checks that are being written, but the amount of fraud is going up exponentially. With the advent of EMV chips in the debit and credit cards, that made it more difficult for the bad guys to have debit and credit fraud. So they went to the path of least resistance, which is back to the paper checks. Because they can get the paper checks, they can wash them, they can alter them, they can go out on the illicit social media sites, Telegram and places of that nature, and buy counterfeit check making kits. So the access to the tools to help them make counterfeit checks that look really, really good, it's really, really hard for the human eye to detect, is there. So community banks and regional banks have to fight fire with fire, and improve their defenses by layering protections on how they can combat the fraud. How do they detect if a check's been washed? How do they detect if a check is counterfeit, if it's forgery, or if it's been altered? With the payment methods changing, going back to the path of least resistance is checks. The bad guys also will say the money is in checks, it's lucrative. And if a deal goes bad, it's not as bad as if another form of crime goes bad where there's potentially harm to them, danger to their life, things of that nature. So the crime rings are going to the path of least resistance, and where the money's good and the hazard or risk is not as high.
Right. And I've also heard that, bad actors can buy stolen checks like on the dark web. Is that something else you see?
Absolutely. We have a service here that monitors the dark web, and I would highly recommend that to any community bank that as part of your protection against check fraud is layer your defenses. Have a positive pay solution, have a check fraud detection solution, have a dark web monitoring service that monitors the dark web for stolen checks that may be written against your bank by one of your clients that's been intercepted in the ecosystem, and it never gets to the destination that it was intended to. That check, once it's been stolen, within 8 days, the bad guys will try to sell it, or they will try to cash it, one of the two. If they sell it, then they're trying to do counterfeit checks and write more checks against that account. Or if they try to cash it, the funds will be gone. And then the bank and the client are then fighting to try to recover their money. It's not just the loss of funds, but it's a headache and the time involved in trying to recover it. But yes,
Yeah.
the dark web is out there. It's live, it's active, it's massive. And you can buy anything and everything on the dark web, checks, check making kits, counterfeit making kits. Unfortunately, you can, the bad guys buy the postal keys, unlock the blue boxes out there where they get a lot of source. That's the source of a lot of their checks they steal is out of the blue boxes. So it's you got to fight fire with fire.
Yeah, that's terrifying to think about because it sounds like even though not a lot of people write checks, that just makes, like you said, it just makes the proportion of check fraud that much higher. And it sounds like it's pretty devastating to community banks and their customers.
It is. And, you just said something that made me think of something. This number of checks being written are going down, but the number of small checks are really going down. The small dollar amounts, the checks you used to write for birthdays or, Christmas gifts or graduation gifts, those checks are going down because people are using Venmo, other ways of getting the money to the person they're sending the gift to. But the larger checks are still there. And businesses are still writing checks because of the paper trail that they like to have, writing a check, having the paper trail. Those are the ones that are being stolen. If you go out and look in the database of a dark web monitoring service, majority of the checks out there are most likely businesses. And I will tell you, I mentioned the fact a while ago that the mailbox keys are being sold on the dark web and the blue boxes are being broken into. All the mail carriers that are delivering are sometimes being held up and robbed. If you see an envelope and you've sent Christmas cards and birthday gifts and whatnot, the red, the green, the yellow envelopes that's in the mail, that's just flashing that there's something inside most likely. And so when they steal the mail, they don't take it all. They just take what looks like to have a check or something included. So Again, those are flashing signs for the bad guys. There's something in here for you. And when they take the checks, you'll find the envelopes, pretty much thrown on the side of the ground next to it. All they want's a check out of it.
Man, that's crazy. It's scary how prevalent this kind of fraud and this theft is and how devastating it can be. You mentioned a few, tools that would be helpful to community banks to combat check fraud, but what do you see community banks doing? Are they employing some of the tools that you've mentioned, or are their processes more manual, or is there a process in a lot of community banks? What are you seeing?
Well, what we're seeing out there, Madison, is that the larger institutions, the larger regional and large financial have departments, fraud departments and fraud teams. And so they have been fighting check fraud at their level a little bit longer than what I think the community banks maybe have been doing it, because they just don't have the abundance of resources available, because it's a very manual task if you don't put automation in. A lot of banks will look and say, okay, every check over a floor, say it's $1,000 or $1,500, every check over that we're going to look at with our manual eyes and try to detect if this is a forgery, or if it's been washed or altered, or is it counterfeit, is it fraudulent? And if you think about it, that's possibly several hundred checks that you'd be looking at every day with your manual eyes. Humans are humans and they're going to make mistakes. Automation, and it's not perfect either, but it's pretty daggone good and close to being perfect. And what a lot of bad guys will realize that this bank A has a floor of $1,500. So now all of a sudden, all their forged checks or all their counterfeit checks or all their altered checks are going to come in under that threshold, not detect it, and will cash and get their money and go on. With the automation of check fraud detection tools, there's no floor. You look at every check that's coming through the bank, through the cash letter, over the counter. So you're not just catching the high dollar amounts, but you're also catching the small dollars that in aggregate will add up to a nice sum of money potentially lost if you're not catching those. So large banks have fraud departments, small banks do it by committee. Check fraud detection automates that. It makes it more efficient and more accurate in stopping the bad actors.
Yeah, for sure. I can only imagine how how difficult it would be to catch a lot of these things manually, especially if, they're just getting smarter and smarter and better at counterfeiting, like you said.
It is with the deep machine learning and the AI technology that we have, that we deploy within our solution, that others also deploy. It gets smarter as they see more and more checks. They get to know each account. They get to know their check writing patterns, their check writing trends, how they sign their name, how they write out the checks. Is it paid to the order of? Is it cursive or is it print? Is it the date written out July 28th, or is it numerical 7/28? We look at a lot of different triangulations on the check and a lot of different points of interest on the check, and we compare it to a profile that we built for each account. And if there's anything that's off, we present it to the operator for verification. And that right there will catch and stop, detect and stop most all checks. There's some that will get by because they're just that good, but we will detect and stop majority of all the fraudulent items.
I mean, that sounds like a great solution. Do you hear, what's an objection you hear commonly to automating this process or using AI to catch fraud detection? Do banks have objections to that?
I've not really heard objections to it. Some of the small community banks have not really seen a lot of fraud yet. When I talk to banks, that they tell me they've not had fraud, I know they're not really telling the truth. Maybe I won't say they're not telling the truth, but they may just not know. But every bank is experiencing fraud at some level, but it may not be to the pain point that they need. They feel the need to invest in automation and bring in check fraud detection tools. So really, the only objection I've heard from some of the community banks is we're not really experiencing that much fraud yet, so we're just going to keep doing it manually until it becomes a problem where it's more than we can handle. And at that point in time, they will then invest in the tool.
Right. And that makes sense. Do you have, other than, investing in an AI tool? I ask that because, a lot of the time when you start talking about AI, some banks will get a little bit nervous, um, particularly on the regulatory side. But do you have advice for dealing beyond, investing in detection tools to either supplement or replace what they're having to do manually right now? Do you have a piece of advice that you'd give community banks for dealing with check fraud?
Um, when I'm talking to a community bank and we're having the discussion related to fraud losses, is it trending up? Is it trending down? Have you had experience, or have you had any clients that had their account compromised, meaning their checks were stolen out of the postal system, whether it be at the post office, the blue box, the box on the street, maybe a mailbox, a bank, a mailbox at an apartment complex? If any of those answers come back yes to a community bank, then we start talking about what can we do, or what can they do in order to help them protect themselves, not just themselves, but also protect their best clients. Because when a check is compromised, there's a couple things you can do. You can stop payment on the check. You can close the account out potentially and reopen one up. If it's a commercial account and it's tied to a lot of other services, AR, AP type of service at your business, it's harder to close one out and open back up. So you work with the community bank and talking strategies. And I always want to talk about layer protection. You've heard me say that earlier. Layer in your protection, a positive pay, a check fraud detection, dark web monitoring service. All three of those things will help you detect and stop fraud in the early stages of it. The sooner you catch it in the ecosystem, the better off you are to save the funds from going out the door. And once the check is cashed and the money is gone, LexisNexis has a stat out there that is actually a 4-to-1 ratio. The time, effort, and expense and effort to recover that check is 4 times greater than the actual dollar amount of the check. So trying to catch it early on in the ecosystem is where you really want to do it. And so having protection on the front end actually helps you do that. I equate it to, like, over in England, you'll see a castle. If you're talking about layers, you have the moat around the castle. You have the drawbridge to get across the moat. You have the big doors on the outside walls of the castle to go through, and then you get into a courtyard of the castle, and then you get into the castle itself, where you get into through the door into the hallways, and there's another door into the rooms. Those are layers of defense protecting what's inside the castle. That's what I kind of simulate banks should look to do, is layer their protection. If one doesn't catch it, maybe the next layer does, or the third layer. And I promise you, if you do that, you're going to win more often than you lose.
I think that's really good advice. That the 4-to-1 stat is just mind blowing to me. But everything you said makes me really look forward to your presentation at Boo on September 5th. So for, my last question to you, tell our listeners, they've heard what you have to say. Tell them why they should also come to your session at Boo, what they can expect to learn.
Well, they're going to learn that check fraud is not going down. It's going up. It's here. It's here to stay for the foreseeable future. We're going to talk about what we have seen in the community bank place market, what we've learned of what we've done to help banks detect, stop, and mitigate fraud. I always like learning from my conversations that I have with community banks and what they're doing, because all banks are not the same. They do things a little differently, and they fight their battles differently. So I like to learn from them and incorporate that into what we do and help. But we're going to talk about check fraud. We're going to talk about how our application can help, but we're going to talk about what the industry is doing in general to beat this and to fight it, and some things that I think that need to happen in the next 6 months, 12 months, 2 years as an industry to really make it harder for the bad guys to win.
Awesome. And that's what we all want. Make it harder for the bad guys to win, protect our community banks, and protect their customers. So,
I grew up in a small community in Kentucky. My father was in banking. I understand what the community bank means to the community. It's the pillar. It's the financial stability of the community. The bank is looked to for a lot of reasons, for financial relationships, for uh, um, competence, partnerships. They're all there. So the community banks are there to protect and help their clients. We want to help them do that because if you do it, you're going to have more confidence from your customers to continue doing business with you. And the community banks is the foundation of our I think our country. And so having them be strong and successful and provide services to their clients is what we try to do to help them. And I think that's what everybody wants. So yes.
absolutely. I concur as a fellow small town Kentuckian who grew up with community banks. Well, Coy, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. Thank you for all the information that you've shared, and we're looking forward to having you speak at Boom in September.
I'm looking forward to it as well. And always, from being from Kentucky, it's always great to get back to the Bluegrass State. And I can't wait to meet the folks there at the ICBB Boom Conference.
Thank you for listening to the Correspondent podcast. We hope that you've learned something valuable to take back to your community bank. If you're listening on Spotify, leave us a rating and review. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to our channel for more updates. See you next time, community bankers.